Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our transit series. And I'm here with Brandon of Bramstrology, who's been here a billion times so far. Welcome back, old friend.
It's so happy to be here. Happy to be back. Thanks, Pete.
You're welcome. So, we both have gone through this transit of the Jupiter square Jupiter. And I have to say, there are certain transits that get, a little bit of a bad rap in astrology. Pluto hitting Mercury was not super fun for me, but I didn't realize how incredibly life changing this transit was until I sat down to do the math on it. And you had a similar experience. So I want to start this off by saying this is a transit to really pay attention to. Like this is not an easy moment for a lot of people, and it is defining, life defining.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Jupiter is very much how we find our faith, how we find our meaning. And there's a lot of meaning when Jupiter itself is kind of, um, looking at itself in your natal chart and kind of causing that kind of third quarter moon aspect, whether it's a full moon or new moon, however, we're kind of looking at that square when it's like an opening or closing square. So there is going to be just a pressure to want to rebuild your faith or realize what you believe in. And I think it's going to be really exciting to talk about this today. I'm really excited.
Yeah. So, for people who are new to astrology, let's just quickly go over Jupiter. Jupiter is our faith. It is the belief systems in which we conduct based on our experiences and the knowledge that we have. Jupiter is the knowledge that we have, and it is our quest for attributing meaning to things. It's also the principle of higher learning. So it can show like university level learning that is through experiences such as travel. So, like when we're going to a country we've never been, we're probably going through a Jupiter transit somewhere, right?
Mhm.
We're trying to grow, we're trying to learn. And in the ancient world, Jupiter also had a lot to do with our children. So it was a signifier of children because it's how we're fortunate or our luck in this lifetime, our abundance. And back in the day, you had more children, you had more people to work in the crop fields, and you made more money. So
Yeah.
Jupiter was seen as a fortunate thing. So it sometimes can be indicative of our children, but it's also sometimes associated in women's charts as the marriage partner. But Jupiter means different things to different people. For some people, that's marriage. For some people, that's children. For some people, that's university level learning. And for some people, that's building a spiritual practice. It really depends on our Jupiter story.
Mhm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think in addition to that, I think Jupiter also speaks to how we most ideally want to learn or most ideally want to be taught or teach. I found that the Jupiter sign in people that are professors, because Jupiter rules, the like college professors, the teachers, the ones that are professing and speaking things and kind of preaching things, depending upon their Jupiter placement, may show um, how they are approaching what they're teaching and how their teaching styles are kind of linked to that as well. Yeah.
Definitely. Universities were first founded, at least in the United States, as spiritual. They were connected to religious institutions, right? Historically, most of our colleges were started as religious places of worship, right? And so that's why these two ideas kind of cross over into one another. It's supposed to be the planet of ethics, our sense of ethos, our principles. Sometimes you get somebody who has some Jupiter drama going on in their chart, and that can be off. So that's not to say that all religious people are ethical, but these ideas were considered at one time to be interchangeable, right? So they're like religion offered a sense of ethical ways of like moving through the universe. So
Mhm.
Jupiter's also just our principles, and generally speaking, our principles are based on our beliefs, right?
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. I think in Jupiter is such a obviously abundant planet as well. It gives a lot of optimism and opportunity. And I think with the Jupiter placement, because it's related to faith and optimism and those things, it's about following that and following that spark and following that inspiration. Whether that is to go to a place of worship, or whether it's to learn how to worship, and work through one's own, temple, creating one's own temple, however that may be, their own spiritual practice, right? Full moons, new moons, those sorts of things. Um, you know, it was very abundant energy, and it's about following that and learning about your Jupiter placement as well. So I think it's really, really powerful. Yeah.
I love that.
Mhm.
Um, Another thing to consider when we're talking about our Jupiter too is publishing,
Mhm.
broadcasting, and that's how we share ideas essentially, right? Like we broadcast them, we write a book. That's again why this idea is connected. Sometimes people are like, well, that's so random. Why is my publishing a YouTube channel have anything to do with this or that? And, a lot of times when you're publishing something, you're trying to share your ideas, your beliefs, your hopefully your values.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the opposition to, at least Mercury in that regard. Jupiter and Mercury are very much opposite in a lot of ways. And so when we think about Mercury, this is like one's individual story. And then when we think about Jupiter, this is, the broader scope of that, the bigger kind of picture, which is where obviously publishing comes in. It's like taking your own private story or personal story, and then, like you said, broadcasting it.
Folklore.
Yeah, it's really, really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, so it can be, usually the person with the folklore is the person that's trying to teach the lesson. Like I
Hmm.
I would go to synagogue as a kid, and I'm sure it's like this in certain Christian churches as well. I would imagine like you hear some sort of story from the Bible, and then you attach it to something that might be happening in your life or the life of a client. And that's kind of what an astrology reading is kind of a little bit like too.
Hmm.
You'll get anecdotes. Like I had a client who blah, 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 and then you can kind of think about it in terms of your own life. How does that story apply to me? It's metaphor in that way. And that's a very Jupiterian principle as well. Um, so squares, they
Yeah.
are 90-degree angles. And think about what a 90-degree angle is. Like that's you having to make a U-turn in some sort of way. Like it's like you think you're going this way, you got to go this way.
Hmm.
That's a challenge. So when Jupiter gets squared, we are challenging our beliefs. We're
Hmm.
challenging what we think we know.
Yep.
We're looking to grow. We're looking to expand in new directions that maybe we didn't anticipate. So it's an interesting time because it really causes a mental shift. This is the transit of mental and sometimes physical shifting.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it is, as someone who is currently still going through my Jupiter square Jupiter at this current time recording, um, it is very much something that rings true to that. And that's why I'm so grateful to be able to do this particular episode today, because there's so much that I think I have been learning through this process, as I'm actively going through it, um, that is immensely valued. People that are going to be going through it in the years to come, or even are going through it now if they're watching it now, right? All Jupiter's in Gemini. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's a lot, but I'm excited about it.
Yeah. So if you have a client coming in and you're an evolutionary astrologer, so I'm
Mhm.
curious, you have a client coming in, they're about to have a Jupiter square.
Mhm.
What sort of ideas, situations, thoughts,
Mhm.
mantras, whatever it might be, what comes to mind as far as the first thing you want to tell them in terms of like what they might expect?
Yeah. So when it comes to the Jupiter square Jupiter transit, a lot of it, and I was kind of mentioning a little bit earlier, is going back to that point of like the closing square, the opening square. So obviously, it's very important to see whether or not Jupiter is squaring, on the sign after your own Jupiter or before your own Jupiter, because there's a lot of differences within how that square is going to play out. If it's in the closing square, which would be the one prior to your own Jupiter sign, that would be where there's kind of like closing chapter of your beliefs and kind of getting you ready for that Jupiter return. versus the opening square where Jupiter's on the opposite side of that. It is working up to the Jupiter opposition, which will then be kind of like a culmination or a full moon of all things Jupiter. So it's really first about figuring out where they're at in that cycle, because Jupiter is going to kind of have a different trajectory of what its goal is moving forward from there. Obviously, looking at the house placement, things like that. But a lot of what I would say to a lot of people from an evolutionary perspective about Jupiter square Jupiter is a lot about beginning to reassess your values, reassess your beliefs, be able to see what you derive meaning from. Because with the Jupiter square Jupiter, there is a tension between those two, well, between Jupiter and itself, to really understand and extract as much meaning from whatever that experience is. And what may happen, at least what's happening in my case, is there's like an overwhelming amount of opportunity with Jupiter square Jupiter. And it's not like a Jupiter return or Jupiter opposition where it's a little bit more loudly obvious what is meant to be expanded upon. But during a Jupiter square on both ends, it's not necessarily something that we're really clear on what we are expanding or what opportunities we have to kind of build and find meaning in, what we're finding that meaning or deriving that meaning from. So a lot of Jupiter, like I said, you want to look to see what the Jupiter sign is, of course, for further context with that. But overall, the Jupiter square Jupiter is a lot about reassessing your belief system and seeing what really lights you up and was really purposeful to you, and what is your guiding light. Because once that Jupiter, return or opposition comes, those are both within of themselves their own kind of changing points within your belief systems. And I think there's a lot of power in both of those transits, which we're not going to obviously go into today, but knowing that the Jupiter square Jupiters are connected to or leading up to those kind of refreshers or culminations as all things Jupiter relative to like a new moon, full moon in Jupiter things, belief, meaning, all the things we talked about. So that's what I would say as a long-winded Mercury Jupiter individual myself. That's what I would get at with that. I think there's a lot of meaning and looking to see what the meaning is that they're getting from their current experience.
Occasionally, we can see litigation with this because Jupiter rules the courts.
Yep.
If it's not like a courtroom situation, it can kind of feel like your life has become some level of kangaroo court, because kangaroo court, I'm saying this in a sense where it's like, you think people are one way, you think the world moves in this way, you attribute meaning to something in a certain way. And then when that gets challenged and you find out that it doesn't, oftentimes we're left with this like feeling of like maybe someone has swindled us, maybe taught us the wrong thing, maybe being called out for it being the wrong thing. Maybe we're going to have experiences that get us out of our comfort zone. And with that, there's going to be some level of change or perspective. Another key word with Jupiter is perspective shift. And so these are the things I'd really kind of anticipate in your own life. There's some sort of like the court system is an evaluation process, or it should be, right? So there's some sort of like, swing of the scales in a way with a Jupiter square that's happening. And so whether that is in the court of law or the court of life, there's something kind of happening there. So I would think about things like a lawyer, a little bit. Like that might be a piece of advice I would say, like including your own thoughts, like really kind of interrogating yourself, like where did this belief stem from? How are these pieces of the puzzle related? It encourages you to, be Jerry Orbach, to do, like Law and Order, your life.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, and Law and Order is such a great analogy, more specifically to like Jupiter and Saturn. But I think it is really important to understand with Jupiter and Saturn, they do tend to kind of work in tandem. And it's important to kind of understand that if you have too much of Jupiter, it can be bad. And if you have too much of Saturn, it can be bad. But a lot of people speak more on the too much Saturn being bad and don't really speak on the thing that too much Jupiter can also be bad, and how they say about, anything in excess is bad for you, even if it was initially a good thing, right? This is, even thinking about, not to go super Scorpio morbid, but thinking about, overdoses is literally like a Jupiterian sort of framework or wording, as well as just overwhelmed, right? That's just another Jupiterian thing, or even just, too much sugar, too much inflammation, too much of something is very, can be Jupiter, even if it is positive, right? We look so
I'm
much at
thinking of the
that.
Spice song.
Huh?
I'm thinking of the Spice Girl song. Too much,
Oh, okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
too much of something is
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. No, I agree. And that's very, very true. Um, and the Jupiter square Jupiter is definitely up that alley. Um, so I do have the planet in transits written version of what the Jupiter square Jupiter transit is likely to kind of.
Yeah, can you read
What's
that?
Absolutely, yeah, I was going to. It's by Robert Hand, so many astrologers will know him. Whether you're beginner or intermediate or advanced, you typically know who Robert Hand is, and his books are phenomenal. If you don't have any of his planet in transits, planet in composite, planet in I forgot what the other ones are. They're all really, really great for just learning and reading through a lot of different things. So when it comes to Jupiter square Jupiter, um, it says with this transit, it is very important that you keep your affairs from getting out of hand. There is a strong tendency to excess, which may make it impossible to keep up with whatever you are involved in, simply because it is more than you can handle. Be particularly careful concerning financial matters, for you are likely to spend without thinking, confident that there is an abundance of money or other resources to back you up. You may not notice the pinch immediately, but shortly after this transit, you may experience shortages that will be severely exacerbated if you spend money foolishly now. But money is not the only area of concern. You may be overcommitted to projects that demand more time than you really have. So, in every area of your life, make sure that you really have the time or resources to do what you have set out to do. Do not overestimate the resources at your disposal. If you avoid that pitfall, this can be a very fruitful transit because it gives you more confidence and optimism and allows you to undertake projects that you would ordinarily be reluctant to take on. Also, your basically positive attitude helps to ensure that your affairs will turn out the way that you want. Under this transit, some persons experience a kind of ego inflation in which they have delusions of grandeur or overestimate their self importance. This can lead to arrogant behavior and inflated pride with little or no real substance behind it. What this transit does is test your sense of proportion. You have to know what you really can and cannot do and who you really are. Insofar, insofar as you fulfill those conditions, this transit will give you apparent luck and greater power to achieve. Insofar as you do not know about yourself, you will experience the negative effects of the transit. So that was, like I said, that was Robert Hand's Planet in Transit for just specifically Jupiter square Jupiter. Um, so yeah, any thoughts on that, B? Because I have a lot of like.
I, so when I went through my Jupiter square the last time, um, like, and again, if you're analyzing your own chart, you want to see what Jupiter is doing in your chart and what houses it rules, because that's really where the activation is going to be. For me, I have Jupiter and Uranus square my ascendant. So it was going to be a little bit more of a challenging time because I have that natural square to who I am happening in that moment. Jupiter and Uranus can be quite a lovely conjunction, but if it's the challenge, it's not going to necessarily be the easiest. It's in my fourth house and it rules my seventh house because I am a Virgo rising. And so these two fundamental houses are getting hit too. So anytime we have something happening with an angle house, sort of affecting the entire chart.
Mm.
So um, the positives where I was writing a lot and it was a beautiful time for me to question what I'd already believed to be true. In this case, it was my relationship habits. It was my relationship with my family, fourth house stuff, and how that like connected to my seventh house stuff, my romantic partnerships, my friendships. Um, it also was a time where the karma of my family definitely played out in my friendships with other people. I also moved during this time, so there was a physical proximity that I was in that was very different from my family. It was a period of time where I wasn't speaking with my family, with that being in my fourth house. So I was kind of going out and doing my own thing and becoming independent. That's the Uranus of it all.
Mm.
And with that came a lot of very big challenge through crisis. And everything that I believed in, every single thing that I grew up to believe was true about the world. It wasn't one thing. It was many things were challenged, and to the point I literally had a level of ego death. Who am I? What does it all mean? And that really created a thirst for what is true. And so with that kind of really became my magical practice. It was a time where I started a zine fest. So I was also encouraging people to self-publish, which feels very Jupiter Uranus, especially young children, because as a kid, I didn't have in the past, the fourth house, I didn't have a voice. And so I wanted to give the voice to other people. And zine making is a lovely way to do that. You know, you don't need a book deal to be a writer. You can make your own book. And so I encouraged young people to make their first zine there. And that was really cool. It was a wonderful experience to share my love of self-publishing. So in that way, it was this really beautiful thing. But I was also going in my inner world through this very sad period of having to reevaluate my beliefs. I used to have a lot of like punk rock ethos. And at that time, I went and I volunteered at this very popular club that it's an all ages club that people volunteer only. And they had these, and part of why I wanted to go there was because of the rules on the door was like everything I believed in: no homophobia, no violence, no transphobia, no sexism, no misogyny, like all of these very like leftist kind of radical ideas that I don't think are that radical, right? And I think that's just like being respectful, being a good person, don't to be that way. So I went and I volunteered there. And once I found out how the club was actually run, I realized that all of those things were happening within the club. But
Mm.
like it was a thing that if you had called it out, and I did, because I am neurodivergent and I can't not do that. It was kind of brought to this a little bit of a kangaroo court situation, where we had this meeting and we voted on things, and they voted for the violent offender. And
Wow.
I was just in shock. And I couldn't understand it. Like, what a lie and these things are. And it really affected me. But it also prepared me because here I am in my Jupiter opposition now.
Mm-hmm.
And I am helping a really dear friend stand up to her abuser in family court. And family court is a much more well-known, widely accepted form of what I experienced during my square. But it's also a thing where like technically it is a more important thing, but because I went through this less important thing, it's like I got this. Like I understand how these people work, and I know how to maneuver it now in a way where she can prove that these are the things she has experienced, and hopefully they're going to listen to her. And my magical practice hopefully helps a little bit with that as well. And
Yeah,
that's Jupiterian. But it just yeah, it was a really powerful time. Lots of different Jupiter things you can take away from that story.
absolutely. I love that. I love hearing your entire story. That's so, and I know it's only a snippet of it too, but um, that's so beautiful because I think Jupiter is all about giving that faith and optimism, and kind of to the point that I was saying earlier about the square leading up to either an opposition or a return. It's very um invigorating. It's very like it's overwhelming, but then it is teaching you so much in such a compact amount of time that you will then inevitably teach that or utilize that on, once again, either that opposition or that return. And I think your story is like a perfect example of that. Because it was in your seventh house about like helping other people learn how to self-publish, which is so like that is so Jupiterian,
Yeah.
in so many different ways, and I think um it has been very different for me, although like as many of you know, I'm much younger than the host here, but at the end of the day, that doesn't, we have a lot of similarities. But my point being is I'm still not I'm still not even at my Jupiter return yet, post Saturn return, and so that in and of itself is going to have a lot of context, and a lot of growth in a lot of ways. Because if we kind of go to the story of my chart, I have Jupiter and Mercury. Um, Jupiter's at 11, Mercury's at 13, and they're in mutual reception, which, by the way, shameless plug of the mutual reception seminar that I did. If you don't know what mutual reception is, there's a mutual reception seminar on the Coven where you can learn more about that specific concept. But essentially, my Mercury and Jupiter are in each other's signs. And so whenever anything is in a mutable sign, it is quite active for me. And this Jupiter has been dancing around, squaring my own Jupiter and opposing my own Mercury, all this year, all this summer, really. And it coincided directly with a co-production of a really amazing fashion show where I was able to do a lot of really great stuff. And what I had read earlier, um, in regards to it gives you more confidence and optimism, and it allows you to undertake projects that you would ordinarily be reluctant to take on. That was kind of what had happened. And at the almost the exact first Jupiter square, because I have a second one coming up here, in about February or March of 2025, that was when the actual show had finished, which was very interesting, because it added to and has since added to the work and the capability I have for myself to work, because Jupiter's in my sixth house. And what's interesting is that I will more than likely be doing a second co-production of a fashion show, come the next Jupiter square, around February, March, of 2025 as well, that I actually, funny enough, got from a referral from the first fashion show during the first Jupiter square, which is very interesting and very just perfectly timed, right?
I
Um,
like that you took on these big projects during this time.
yeah, yeah, and they're big projects related to specifically social media and marketing and learning the whole Gemini communicative technology organizational stuff. And it has been a whirlwind, for me in regards to different projects and getting a lot of things done. And in addition to that, there's been quite a lot of mysterious health things that have also been happening that are also kind of all different symptomatic things. But I also am organically learning a lot about my own health and my own health routine, because once again, I am a natal Jupiter in Virgo myself. So I already kind of have that within me to learn that kind of organically and kind of learn how to work within my health system and learn that relationship. So that has been very interesting in and of itself as well, and kind of working with what works for me in my health, because that's never really been solidified really. um, and then really learning to prioritize mental health in relation to this, because of how once again it's hitting my own Mercury, which is the ruler of the Jupiter in the sky and my Jupiter in my own chart that's being activated. So it's a lot, but I'm very excited for what's to come when Jupiter does return, around the age of 36 or so for me in a couple years. And that is a very exciting, evolutionary time in a lot of ways. A new nexus point, a new kind of return that I think a lot of people feel is coming from their Jupiter opposition during their Saturn return, and then they don't realize it. And then once that Jupiter return hits around 36, I feel like that's when a lot more stuff really opens up, and expands in such a beautiful way. So, yeah, I'm excited to see.
Be more potent for people who have, like, for example, like if you have planets that are conjunct or making like harsh aspects to Jupiter,
Mhm.
but also like if you are a Sagittarius or if you're a Pisces, your sun is literally ruled by Jupiter. So it's going to be bigger for you guys, or rising.
Yes.
You
Yeah. So to that point, something I want to bring up with you be that you brought up you just sparked the Mercury Jupiter in me to remind me of this. Um, because the thing about Jupiter squares in specific, this is actually very important for those that are Sagittarius and Pisces ruled charts, because as you know, Jupiter is your chart ruler, and so you don't really have these big, solar returns or lunar returns like Leo or Cancer risings or Mercury returns like all those other ones, and so your Jupiter transits become very, very, very important when they are transits to Jupiter themselves because of the fact that you are ruled by that. So if you are a Sagittarius or Pisces rising, because like we had mentioned earlier, those Jupiter ruled houses are really important for these transits. It's really, really crucial to really pay even more attention when you are ruled by Sagittarius or Pisces during this Jupiter square Jupiter, because it's really like bringing you into the mix a lot more than it would if you were a different rising sign that's not Jupiterian. So yeah, that's something I wanted to bring up there. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Let's talk about some remediation. What would
Absolutely.
be some things as an evolutionary astrologer or like in your own practice, you see someone going through a difficult Jupiter transit? Do you have any techniques? Do you have any exercises, things to think about, mantras perhaps?
Yeah. I think for me, as someone who has been going through it, and I kind of referenced this a little bit earlier, um, I think the best benefit is to utilize Saturn, right? Utilize those boundaries because when once again, if you're having a difficult Jupiter transit, it tends to be a lot of things in excess. And so if we utilize Saturn, which is typically everything that's like and antithetical to Jupiter in a lot of ways, it is important to kind of lean into those boundaries and those limits and recognizing those limits and those abilities that you have to put, boundaries and like you don't have enough time to do all of what Jupiter's wanting you to expand in certain ways. So that's something I think would be really great for remediation. Look to your Saturn to kind of help ground you when you are feeling overwhelmed in that sense. Um, and I think it does obviously coincide with what's specifically going on within the chart. So as you said earlier, if Jupiter is angular, we're not going to go through every single Jupiter type of thing and all those things, but um, in general, if Jupiter is angular, you're going to want to pay more attention to those key areas of life referenced by like the ascendant, descendant, ICMC to kind of get an idea of where you're being expanded, but also where you need to kind of look at contracting. So that is something that's really good. I would also in regards to mantras, kind of bring up mantras relative to, I'm like not necessarily just like I'm doing my best, but something to that effect. I'm doing my best. I'm doing as much as I can handle. Like I said, those are all kind of like mantras that are more relative to lean into Saturn and putting on the brakes a little bit, understanding that you can't be limitless in that regard. And I think it's a lot about that process of slowing down in a lot of ways. Um, so I would think, yeah, remediation, like I said, really overall just lean towards Saturn. And of course, getting, an understanding of what Jupiter's doing in your chart, both as a natal placement and of course by transit. Um, because if it's hitting some various stuff, it's going to flavor it all differently, obviously. And so that's where, getting readings from anyone within the coven is a great, great asset as well for that. So that's really all I really would say. Like I said, I think a lot of what remediates Jupiter is Saturn, and in the inverse as well is true, right? What remediates Saturn difficulties is Jupiter, right? Finding meaning and finding structure and finding, like those things need to be kind of balanced, right? So I think it's a lot about not trying to find meaning in everything, but taking the time, be patient with that process as you're unfolding and growing, because you're always evolving. Even if you try and stop it, you are still evolving, just in ways that you are delaying in a way. So just allow the evolution to take its path, if you will.
Yeah, I love that. Um, I think when I think about Jupiter, I mean, obviously, you can build an altar for Jupiter. That's a great way to start to connect with Jupiter energy.
Mhm.
Day of the week that is associated with Jupiter is Thursdays. So you can, carve a little Jupiter symbol into a candle, put a little bit of oil on it, and, just, Orphic him to Jupiter. You guys can look that up if you want to recite that. That's a great little offering, costs no money at all. Um, Jupiter's associated with adaptogenic type of herbs.
Hmm.
So interested in experiencing those. Uh, they can also be pretty helpful. A lot of mushrooms are
Hmm.
Jupiterian energy. So if that's for you, I'm not an herbalist, but those are other things that you might want to explore during a Jupiter year or a Jupiter square. Um, Other things to consider are the seals of Solomon. These ancient seals that are used in spell work. They have various meanings. But if you look at the seals of Solomon for Jupiter, there's quite a few of them. And their meanings, you can find something that's in alignment with what uh, maybe your goal is during this transit. Maybe you're trying to win a court case. Maybe you're trying to create abundance in your life. There's a seal for everything, I swear. So look up the seals of Solomon for Jupiter. Also, if you're a coven member, if you're an Astro School member and you're watching this, I did a workshop called Jupiter Transits Through the Houses and How to Work with Them. I talk about each one of the Solomon seals in that video. So you can go grab that and watch that. And there's a few other remediations that you're going to grab from that video as well for Jupiter. But yeah, seals of Solomon are great. And also, I'm just thinking like, you're a fashion person, right? Like, you can dress for Jupiter. Like,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
a great
And
channel. Like Jupiter is big, it's abundant energy. It
mm-hmm.
wants to be a little bit fancy. So if you're,
Mm-hmm.
going through a period of time where your beliefs are being challenged, you don't know who you are, experiment with your fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Think about who you want to be and start stepping into that character, right? It's like fake it till you make it type of stuff. What kind of okay, so like Anthony Parada, who is another great astrologer who's been on this channel, he talked in astro style about Jupiter transits having a lot to do with the Pantone colors of the year. Again, another video to go watch if you're an astro school
Yeah,
student.
we're just plugging all the videos. I love it though. I love it.
But like, yeah, you can just work with Jupiterian colors. What colors do you associate with Jupiter?
I tend to associate like golds and purples with Jupiter.
Yeah,
Um,
purple for sure.
yeah, gold I think can have like a little bit of a couple other meanings, or like kind of like yeah, I'm seeing like a lavender, like that kind of color, which is also kind of
Yeah,
cool. Like a lavender, or like a kind of like a more like a teal blue, if you will, can kind of have a little bit of
yeah.
that
I,
Jupiterian quality to it. Purples, like I said, lavender, that kind of color is really, really Jupiterian to me. Jupiter also rules horses, so anything relative to horses is going to. What were you going to say?
horse riding, I love horse riding. If you can afford to do it, it's a one, especially if you have issues with codependency, you should ride horses because
Mhm.
horses, you can't lie to horses. Horses are super intuitive. They can tell when you're trying to people please them. They don't allow for it. So they're
Yeah.
going to call you right out on your bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah. No, horses are a very Jupiterian thing. I never thought I'd find the day, but there was one day I met I believe she was a double Sagittarius, and she literally is like she just rides horses every week. I was like, all
I
right,
find
that's what Sag rules, right? And so it was
yeah.
really cute.
Horse girls often have, and I love this. One day I should do an episode of the astrology of horse girls. But I often find you get a lot of Virgo placements, a lot of Virgo risings because they have Jupiter or they have Sag in that fourth house. So that's their comfort, you
Yep.
know.
Mhm.
Um, and I always say that Virgo risings are a little bit like horses, but that's a conversation for another day. And also Aries. I find a lot of Aries because
Yeah.
Aries is very drawn to horses because it's a singular, sport that you can do. You don't
Mhm.
need else. It's something you can do independently. So I see a lot of Aries that love the horses, but Virgo plays for sure. Um, anyway, some foods that we can associate with Jupiter: apple, asparagus, carob. Oh, I love carob. Currants, cardamom, clove, fennel, figs, nutmeg, sage, and yams. So
Okay.
all foods you can work with Jupiter. Well,
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up the food portion because that makes me think of almost immediately about Thanksgiving,
yeah,
which is always, always, always on the first Thursday of a Sagittarius sun sign season, and so it's always that in and of itself is a manifestation of our I guess our worship to Jupiter or our connection to Jupiter is a lot of it's linked into a lot of the language of Thanksgiving and that process. And what's interesting within just me bringing this up, I can my Aquarius moon can already kind of sense. Obviously, people derive different meaning from Thanksgiving in and of itself because of the history and the meaning derived from that actual celebratory event and the history of that and all of the the unfortunate lives that we weren't taught about um, as it relates to Thanksgiving. And I think there's a lot to be brought up within that conversation as well about just kind of getting some other correlations how Jupiter can manifest because like I said that Thanksgiving is always on a Thursday of Sagittarius season, so it's like a very Jupiterian energy in and of itself, just from a magical perspective too.
for sure. Well, Brandon, is there anything else you wanted to add on the Jupiter square transit?
I think at the end of it all, I think it's really just about having the faith, having faith, building faith, having that optimism. And I think it's a lot about really learning your limits and testing your limits and learning what's worth your time, worth your effort. And in the same vein, there is a lot of meaning that will be derived from a Jupiter transit that you will be able to then apply, especially when you get to that Jupiter return or Jupiter opposition there. Um, and I'm just really, I'm just really elated to just be able to be talking about this transit as I'm going through it because I can only imagine how it's going to be in about 4 years when my Jupiter return and we're recounting this conversation and all the things that are connected to this time. And it's really important as you study astrology to understand that these cycles are kind of always interconnected within the timeline of our life and give us those answers if we're willing to do the work and look at those cycles and study them or learn from one of us here on the Coven to get a better perspective on what to expect when, because the cycles all kind of coincide with other previous cycles if we're willing to do that work. So that's all I have with that in that regard. I'm just really grateful to be here and talk about all this because I just love talking about astrology. It's really
Me
close to.
too. I love when we talk. It's always a blast. Anyway, Brennan, where can we find you? What do you have to promote? Share your links and all the things.
All the things, yeah. So I am on bramstrology.com. So that's BRAMSTROLOGY.com. You can find me on Instagram with the same name as well. I do a lot more on Instagram, if anything. And I am currently working on my 2025 horoscopes. So I'm going through that. I kind of changed my scheduling platform as well. So there's a lot of changes happening, as I'm sure you can imagine, with the Jupiter square Jupiter. Working on my 2025 horoscopes. I'm actually also working on a Jupiter Saturn course that is kind of in the works as well. And then my beginner's course is already out there. So a lot of different things. You guys can book with me wherever you find me, however you feel guided in that regard. So yeah, just kind of a lot of different things, and I'm just excited to be able to have the opportunity to once again speak with you, B, and everyone else here on the Coven, and just have a great conversation, and just pick each other's astrological brains about all this. So yeah, that's really all I have. And if you guys are interested in finding me, all my stuff will be linked, either somewhere in the Coven and or just
Yeah.
you can look it up. Apps.
Astrology.
Yeah, for astrology. Yeah, do whatever you want. You will find me. I'm sure you'll see me again on here. So yeah. What about you? Do you have anything big coming up here besides more Coven things?
I am going to be announcing a one-on-one mentorship that I will be doing soon, guys. If you're excited with work to work with me for a full year, I'm going to be announcing that soon. I haven't told anybody yet, but now you guys, if now you know, by the time this comes out, I'll have announced it. Yeah, other than that, it's a packed October. I hope that you have, I mean, if you're watching this, you've joined us, so I hope you stay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Well, everyone have a great evening. I'll be back with a new astrology video soon, and Brandon will be back for this series in a couple of weeks. Everyone, take care and have a safe evening.
Bye.